There we go. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Why are Gary and Stacy Levine here? They're not in Talmud class, Gary and Stacy.
Welcome them.
Yeah. Okay, just a second here. Stacy and Gary, welcome to Talmud class.
Thank you.
Okay, good. We left off 2 weeks ago. So last Sunday was Purim. We didn't have class. We had read this Mishnah last time, so I'd like to read it again because this is where we're going to take over today in the Gemara. So I just want to make sure we've seen this and remember it. Just context, we're in the tractate called Avodah Zarah, which literally means foreign worship, but is a term denoting idolatry. And there's a tractate so Mishnah is the 6-volume collection of oral teachings that were edited oral teachings over the course of about 300 years, edited in the year 220 CE. And then Gemara is the continued oral teaching and discussion of the Mishnah, edited in Babylonia 300 years later. So Talmud is Mishnah and Gemara together. This Mishnah is this section of Mishnah is talking about laws related to idolatry and how we as the Jewish people are supposed to stay away from it and not to be encouraging idol worship, so that our contact with Gentiles has to be limited. And business with Gentiles, as chapter 1 of this was discussing, has to be limited to times of year. That is, if it's a holiday, a Gentile holiday, you can't do business with them because you might be encouraging their worship of idolatry. And Jews encouraging idolatry is the same as participating in idolatry themselves. So we're on this Mishnah now in chapter 2, which is quite long. It's unusual for the Talmud to have such a lengthy Mishnah like this, but this Mishnah discusses the halachic status of various items that belong to Gentiles. These items that belong to Gentiles, and these are items that belong to Gentiles and are prohibited to Jews. And their prohibition is that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. Wine and vinegar belonging to Gentiles that was originally wine, and Hadrianic earthenware, and hides with a tear opposite the heart. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says a hide is prohibited only when the tear around its heart is circular, but if it is elongated, it is permitted, as Gentiles will sacrifice a heart only when it has been removed by a circular laceration. So there are a number of comments like this throughout this Gemara that is pretty detailed of knowledge of Gentile practice, which raises the question, how do the rabbis know so much about specific Gentile practice? So just it's interesting to keep that in mind. Before we go on with the Mishnah, just some notes. There are halachic notes here about not being allowed to have Gentile wine. It is prohibited to derive benefit from wine belonging to Gentiles due to the concern that it might have been used in an idolatrous ritual. The Ramah, a medieval commentator, writes that as it is very uncommon nowadays for Gentiles to use wine for idolatrous purposes, it is prohibited only for consumption. So So the Ramah is writing in around 1100 CE. So in the Middle Ages, he lived in Provence. So he's writing that in his day, in the 1100s, he was a commentator to an Ashkenazi commentator to Maimonides' summary of Jewish law. So when those diligent students who read Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, it's called, will read it with the Ramah's commentary on it to have a broader perspective of Sephardic and Ashkenazi practice, and this because they were contemporaries. They never met each other. So because Maimonides is writing from Egypt, and like I said, Ramah is in Provence. So Maimonides' manuscript made it to Provence, and the Ramah commented on it. So he says, wine isn't used for idolatrous purposes anymore, but you're still not allowed to consume Gentile wine. It's therefore permitted for a Jew to accept the wine of Gentiles as payment for a debt. The same applies to any situation where rejecting the wine would result in monetary loss. Consequently, although one should avoid purchasing wine from a Gentile ab initio, meaning from the start, if he has already done so, he may resell the wine rather than destroy it. So in other words, if you did it by mistake, not realizing that you shouldn't really do this, once you have it, it's okay, you can resell it, but you're not allowed to use it. Some commentaries contend that it's permitted to buy and sell the wine of Gentiles even for business purposes, although it's best to act stringently in this regard. So there's still a question about whether we can consume not a Gentile wine today. It's a question about kashrut, and there are different kinds of food always require a kosher certification, and some never require, right? Like raw vegetables don't require kosher certification, no matter where you buy it. Eggs don't require kosher certification. Some people question about fish. Can you buy fish from Harris Teeter or Giant, from the fish just behind the counter there in the fish section? Most people, most non-Orthodox people say yes, it's okay, because the knife that the fishmonger is using to cut the fillets of salmon, it's all cold anyway, and they usually wash the knife in between cutting from fish to fish. So it's okay, most people say, to buy fish that way, as opposed to having to go to a kosher market to buy fish. So the question about wine is related to this. Do Gentile winemakers make a libation of the first product of the wine before bottling it and selling it? And if so, then absolutely it would be forbidden. There might be some vintners in Europe that have the priest come to bless the wine. So that would be a question as to whether that wine's okay or not. There are no other ingredients, for the most part today in 2024, that go into the wine process, the sulfites and things like that you find on the ingredients of a wine bottle. Nothing there is treif. So there are many people who will buy and drink non-kosher certified wine. But there would be a question whether you can say Kiddush over non-kosher certified wine. So just different categories there of wine today. So the halacha here about vinegar, it's prohibited to derive benefit from vinegar made from the wine that belonged to Gentiles. So this is like wine vinegar we're talking about, balsamic vinegar, wine vinegar, that is white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar. Other vinegars are made, there's apple cider vinegar, there's rice vinegar, plain vinegar is made from wheat, I think. So we're talking about wine vinegar here. Hadrianic earthenware, one may not derive benefit from any earthenware vessel that, when soaked in water, imparts the flavor of the wine of Gentiles that it has absorbed. Okay, so I guess that's what it means by Hadrianic earthenware. All of this will be commented on in the Gemara, but this is just just an initial kind of understanding of what we're talking about. Hides with a tear opposite the heart. If the hide of an animal contains any indication that it was used in an idolatrous ritual, it's prohibited to derive benefit from it. This halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay, so, all right, so we're talking about wine, vinegar, Hadrianic earthenware, hides that have a circular tear around the heart. All are prohibited are prohibited to Jews. So the Mishnah continues, meat that enters the house of idol worship is permitted, and meat that exits this house is prohibited because it's considered as offerings to the dead, that is, to idols. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. With regard to those going to a festival of idolatry, it is prohibited to engage in business with them. We had learned that in chapter 1. And with regard to those who are coming from it, it is permitted to engage in business with them. So if you know that a Gentile has just come from the idol festival, then it's okay to do business with them because they're not going to go back. Whatever you're doing business with them for, they're not going to take that kind of business back to the festival. So, but if they're going to the festival, then you know that their business with you is in order to celebrate the festival. And like I said, we're not allowed to encourage the celebration of idolatry or the performance of idolatry. So meat that enters the house of idol worship, this is a note just for us to understand this, the novelty of the ruling is that mere intent to offer the meat does not render it prohibited. This is due to the principle that there is no consecration for idol worship. All right, so we're going to get to that, this stuff related to this Mishnah soon, but the Mishnah continues on the next page. Wine skins and jugs belonging to Gentiles, which have a Jew's wine contained in them, are prohibited to Jews, and their prohibition is that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. So if you have kosher wine in a Gentile wineskin, then you can't use it because the wineskin then makes the wine treif. And the rabbis say their prohibition is not that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. Residual grape seeds and grape skins belonging to Gentiles, which are left behind after the grapes are crushed for wine, are prohibited, and their prohibition is that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. This is a statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say moist grape residues are prohibited, but dry residues are permitted. All right, so we're going to get into all of this at some point in the Gemara's discussion. Fish stew and cheese of Beit Unyaki belonging to Gentiles, I just want to make sure, yeah, Unyaki, belonging to Gentiles are prohibited, and their prohibition is that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. This is a statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say their prohibition is not that of an item from which deriving benefit is prohibited. So cheese, let's just look at this. Well, also the fish stew. That's language. Fish stew. This is a dish made of fish brine, which Rabbi Meir prohibits due to the concern that a Gentile might have added wine to it to enhance its taste. All right, if you buy herring, for example, in the store, the Vita herring is in wine sauce, right? So adds to, as opposed to the cream sauce that you can buy herring like. So that brine has wine in it. So I guess that goes all the way back to the time of the rabbis. According to the rabbis, as the wine is not discernible in the fish stew, it is prohibited only to consume the stew. It is permitted to derive benefit from it. All right, so we'll get there. and cheese of Beit Unyaki. Beit Unyaki was a village that produced and exported cheeses to other areas. The Gemara explains that most of the calves in whose stomachs the cheese was curdled were slaughtered for the sake of idol worship and thereby prohibited. Other versions of the text read cheeses and tinyaki, a kind of food prepared by boiling whey. If so, the Gemara is not referring to a specific type of cheese, but to cheeses in general. So perhaps, so we just need to understand that the printed edition of the Talmud is from the late 1600s. Before that, there were different manuscript editions around that had slightly variant words. So that's what this is talking about. Is this a cheese of Beit Unyaki, or is it cheese and tinyaki? If you look at the Hebrew here, you have a letter tuf here. So it could be tunyaki, givinat tunyaki, or is it givinat Beit Unyaki? So especially when you have an unusual word, it makes it difficult for a scribe writing down the manuscript to figure out if he's writing the right thing, because it's an unfamiliar word. So anyway, Beit Unyaki, well, probably the Gemara is going to talk about this too. Okay, so that's fish stew and then cheese of Beit Unyaki. Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Ishmael asked Rabbi Yehoshua a series of questions while they were traveling along the road. Rabbi Ishmael said to him, for what reason did the sages prohibit the cheeses of Gentiles? Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, because Gentiles curdle cheese with the stomach contents of an unslaughtered animal carcass, and as the carcass of an unslaughtered animal is not kosher, cheese that's curdled with it is likewise prohibited. So this is non-kosher cheese today, non-hechsher cheese. I think we did talk about this last time I explained this. Cheese, milk or cream is curdled to become cheese with an enzyme called rennet. And rennet is derived from the stomach lining of an animal. The stomach lining, so you might ask, well, we're mixing meat and milk. Well, when you have less than 1/60th of something in the volume of something else. So let's say you have a drop of milk that's in that accidentally falls into a pot of chicken soup. The drop of milk is less than 1/60th the volume of the chicken soup, and therefore it does not render the chicken soup not kosher, even though milk was being mixed with meat. On Passover, there is no such thing as 1/60th when it comes to chametz. So any amount of chametz found with your kosher or Passover food automatically makes the kosher for Passover food not kosher for Passover anymore. But during the year, anything that is less than 1/60th of the volume of the item does not render the item treif. So if you had somehow a piece of bacon, a tiny piece of bacon falls into your chicken soup, and use that as an example again, that treif doesn't nullify the chicken soup. Okay, that's so you're not supposed to do it on purpose, but by accident, that's okay. So that's so the question is of the stomach lining of an animal carcass of a Gentile, being made in their cheese. So the rabbis are taking the extra step by saying, no, we don't want to have this at all. We don't want to. What's that, Bess?
I was going to say, doesn't intent have anything to do with it? When you drop the milk in the soup, that's accident. But when you curdle milk in a stomach
Right.
line, it's on purpose.
It is on purpose, and the rabbis are still saying cheese is okay to be made this way. So I don't think all cheese is made this way. I don't know. I don't think, I'm not sure cottage cheese is made this way. I don't know. But I know some cheeses need the rennet. Maybe like hard cheeses are made with a rennet. Maybe soft cheeses like cream cheese, cottage cheese. Uh, I don't know. And then there's something in Israel that's called gvina levana, white cheese. Or farmer's cheese. These cheeses, I'm not sure how the curdling happens, but I don't know if rennet is. So I'm not saying that all cheeses are made this way, but for hard cheese, it is made this way, and the rabbis, it's always been permitted intentionally to do a little bit of this rennet. It's just a little bit that's required to make a whole vat of cheese. So I don't know why the rabbis said that it's okay to do it that way, and why it's still considered dairy. But today, a lot of non-kosher cheeses still are made with a vegetable enzyme, a vegetable rennet. So there are a lot of cheeses that are today made that way, and so there's lots of cheese, lots of hard cheese that you can buy that might not have the kosher certification on it, but might not be necessary to have it because it's made with vegetable rennet anyway.
Like I just Googled, and you could use distilled white vinegar instead of um, Reddit or another acid.
Oh,
And mozzarella, ricotta, provolone are made without Reddit.
there you go. Okay, good. So, right. So I don't know what gets the curdling happening there. How to get the milk or the cream transformed into a solid. I'm just not sure how that works. But anyway, there are YouTube videos to watch about that. But so the question is the animal carcass from which the stomach lining is taken. Okay, in response, Rabbi Ishmael said to him, but aren't the stomach contents of a burnt offering subject to a more stringent prohibition than the stomach contents of an unslaughtered animal carcass? And yet they said a priest who is open-minded with regard to what he eats may swallow the stomach contents of a burnt offering while they are raw, and the other sages do not agree with him. But the sages said, one may not derive benefit from the stomach contents of a burnt offering ab initio, and if one did derive benefit from them, he is not liable for misusing consecrated property. According to both opinions, deriving benefit from the stomach contents of a burnt offering is not prohibited by Torah law. Since the halacha with regard to a burnt offering is more stringent than that of an animal carcass, why would deriving benefit from the carcass be prohibited while deriving benefit from the burnt offering is permitted? Okay, I guess the Gemara is going to talk more about the details of that. Also, Rabbi Yeshua said to Rabbi Ishmael, the cheese of Gentiles is prohibited because they curdle it in the stomach contents of calves used for idol worship. Since it's prohibited to derive benefit from such calves, cheese curdled in their stomach contents is also prohibited. Rabbi Ishmael said to him, if that is so, why didn't the sages prohibit deriving any benefit from the cheese instead of merely prohibiting its consumption? Instead of answering Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Yoshua diverted his attention to another matter and said to him, Ishmael, how do you read the following verse in the Song of Songs? Do you read it as, for your love is better than wine, or as, for your love is better than wine? That is, dodecha, let's look in the Hebrew here. Dodecha or dodayich. You see, the letters are the same, but the vowels are a little bit different. This one is plural. This is singular. The first version, which is in the masculine form, would be a reference to God, whereas the second version in the feminine would be a reference to the Jewish people, right? So is dodecha, God's love is better than wine, or the people of Israel's love is better than wine? Rabbi Ishmael said to him that it should be read in the feminine, for your love is better than wine. Rabbi Yoshua said to him, the matter is not so. As another verse teaches with regard to it, your ointments have a goodly fragrance. This phrase, which appears in the next verse, is written in the masculine form, and therefore it's determined that the preceding verse can also be understood in the masculine form. So we'll try to figure out what this random midrash is doing here with all the other things about what you can derive, what you can use from Gentiles. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to begin this lengthy discussion about the Mishnah. From where do we derive that wine belonging to Gentiles is prohibited? Rabbah bar Avu says that the verse states, who did eat the fat of their offerings and drank the wine of their drink offering. This verse juxtaposes the fat of Gentile sacrifices to their wine. Just as deriving benefit from their offering is prohibited, so too deriving benefit from their wine is prohibited. Okay, so that seems pretty straightforward. You can't derive, because the verse from the Torah says, in Deuteronomy 32, that you can't derive benefit from their offerings as well as their wine. So the Gemara asks, from where do we derive the prohibition with regard to an offering itself? It's derived from a verse, as it is written, they joined themselves also unto Baal of Peor and ate the offerings to the dead. From Psalm 106. This verse teaches that just as deriving benefit from a corpse is prohibited, so too deriving benefit from an offering of idolatry is prohibited. The Gemara asks, and from where do we derive the prohibition of a corpse itself? The Gemara answers, it's derived from a verbal analogy between the words there and there, employed with regard to the heifer whose neck is broken, to absolve a city from bearing responsibility for the death of a visitor. It's written here, and Miriam died there, and it is written there, and the elders of the city shall bring down the heifer unto a rough valley, which may neither be plowed nor sown, and shall break the heifer's neck there in the valley. Just as there, deriving benefit from the heifer is prohibited, so too here, deriving benefit from a corpse is prohibited. Okay, so I don't know anything about deriving benefit from corpses. I don't know what corpses could have been used for, human corpses could have been used for in ancient times, but it seems that some parts of human corpses might have been used and sold and whatnot. So the reference to this law here from Numbers 20 is from Deuteronomy 21 is about this idea. You find a dead Jew lying by the side of the road. The Torah says you have to take responsibility for this dead Jew, but who's going to take responsibility for this dead Jew? So you measure the distance to the two closest villages from the corpse, and whichever village is closer to the corpse takes responsibility for the corpse. And they take responsibility by offering a sacrifice to ask atonement from God that this person died, and the people of the town allowed this death to occur and did not protect this person. So it's a powerful statement about how Jews are responsible for one another, but it's a bizarre kind of ritual. So they're just learning about not allowing that we're not allowed to derive benefit from this corpse based on that section. Okay, and from where do we learn that deriving benefit from the heifer is prohibited? The sages said in the school of Rabbi Yanai, a term of atonement is written with regard to the heifer whose neck is broken, just as it's written with regard to sacrificial animals. This teaches that deriving benefit from the heifer is prohibited, just as deriving benefit from sacrificial animals is prohibited. The Mishnah teaches, and vinegar. So all of that to learn how we derived from the Torah that we're not allowed to derive benefit from wine from Gentiles. So now about vinegar. The Mishnah teaches, and vinegar belonging to Gentiles that was originally wine is prohibited. The Gemara asks, isn't this obvious? Just because the wine has soured, should its prohibition lapse? In other words, if we already know wine is prohibited, why does the Mishnah have to teach us about vinegar from wine? Already the wine is prohibited. The wine just becomes vinegar, so why would we think that now it would be permitted? It was still wine from the beginning, and we're not allowed to use it. Rav Ashi said this comes to teach us that our vinegar that is in a Gentile's possession does not require a seal within a seal for it to remain permitted for consumption. Rather, one seal is sufficient. Rav Ashi explains the reason for this leniency. If the concern is due to idolatrous libation, Gentiles do not offer libations of vinegar. And if it's due to the concern that a Gentile may secretly exchange his prohibited vinegar with the vinegar of a Jew, since there is one seal, the Gentile will not exert himself and forge a different seal in order to facilitate the exchange. Right? So in other words, where are you going to keep all of your vinegar? And so we're talking about people who are in the business of trading in vinegar. So you need a warehouse. So maybe it just makes sense, instead of building a Jewish-owned warehouse in a town, there already is a vinegar warehouse. Why not have your Jewish vinegar stored in the Gentile vinegar warehouse? So the question would arise: can you trust the Gentile to maintain the integrity of the Jewish vinegar that's in that warehouse? And this is saying yes, because the Gentile is not going to go to the effort of changing the seal on the Jewish vinegar. Rabbi Ilah says, we learned that cooked wine belonging to Gentiles that was originally uncooked wine is prohibited. The Gemara again asks, isn't this obvious? Just because the wine was cooked, should its prohibition lapse? In other words, we talked about this previously also. There's a status within kosher certified wine, not only that the wine is kosher certified, but there's an extra layer of kashrut to the wine called mevushal, which means cooked. So the idea here about wine, and this is a terrible idea related to relations between Jews and Gentiles, is that another reason, which isn't being discussed here yet, for why we can't drink wine poured by Gentiles, is that you as a Jew are then fraternizing with a Gentile, and that the Gentile is pouring wine for you. And that fraternization, the rabbis say, could lead to marriage. So if a Gentile woman is pouring wine for a Jewish man, it might lead to some kind of relations going on, and you don't want that to happen. So what the way around that is, what happens then at kosher supervised catered events where wine is being served at the reception, and the wine is being poured by non-Jewish wait staff. So here's an example of kosher wine being poured by non-Jews. Is that allowed to happen? The Gemara says no. So all kosher certified events taking place across the country and around the world have to have wine that is mevushal in order for a non-Jew to be able to pour it for a Jew at this kosher catered event. Because if it's mevushal, cooked, then it's not really wine anymore. So the idea then is, if it's not wine anymore, then it's okay for the Gentile to be pouring it. So it seems ridiculous to have that kind of loophole. And how does wine become mevushal? It's a flash pasteurization process. So it's like, yes, the wine reaches that boiling point of the pasteurization, but it happens in one, like a second. So there are wine connoisseurs who can't tell the difference between a pasteurized wine and a non-pasteurized wine. So so I don't hold by this, that I don't see a problem with a Gentile serving non-mevushal kosher wine at event, because the likelihood of a Jew fraternizing and leading to marriage with the Gentile wait staff of the caterer is highly unlikely. And so for me, there's nothing wrong with this. But it is an issue. For example, I know this. A friend of ours got married at a vineyard. The son of a friend of ours got married at a vineyard in Virginia. And there are a lot of people who get married on farms and vineyards. And in order to have a wedding there, you have to serve the wine from that vineyard. So what if you want to have a kosher caterer serve food at the wedding that's taking place at this non-kosher vineyard? So the kosher caterer for this particular wedding said, we can't serve the wine, and you can't. And this particular vineyard, by the way, was not non-kosher. It had a kosher wine, but it wasn't mevushal. So the caterer said, we can't serve this wine. So if you're going to have this wine, you have to serve it yourself. So there are ways that caterers can get around this and allow things like this to happen. But I'm just saying that it's kind of intricate and involved, this whole discussion about about wine and cooked wine. So we learned that cooked wine belonging to Gentiles that was originally uncooked wine is prohibited. The Gemara again asks, isn't this obvious? Just because the wine was cooked, should its prohibition lapse? Rav Ashi said, this comes to teach us that our cooked wine that is in a Gentile's possession does not require a seal within a seal for it to remain permitted for consumption. Rather, one seal is sufficient. Rav Ashi elaborates, if the concern is due to idolatrous libation, Gentiles do not offer libations of cooked wine. And if it is due to the concern that a Gentile may secretly exchange his wine with the wine of a Jew, since there is one seal, the Gentile will not exert himself and forge a different seal in order to facilitate the exchange. Okay, so that's, I'm just looking here about if there's anything, just a second here, about the cooked wine. I don't see anything here. Okay, so on to the next section from the Mishnah that the Gemara is now discussing. The Gemara discusses the halacha with regard to various types of wine. Okay, so now it's going to go off on a discussion about wine in general. The sages taught cooked wine and aluntit of Gentiles are prohibited, but already prepared aluntit that was made by a Jew before it entered the Gentiles' possession is permitted. The Gemara asks, and what is aluntit? It is, as we learned in a Baraita, a source from the time of the Mishnah that didn't make it into the Mishnah, with regard to Shabbat. One may prepare anomlin, but one may not prepare aluntit. The Baraita clarifies. And what is anomlin and what is aluntit? Anomlin is a drink that is a mixture of wine, honey, and pepper. Not sure that sounds so good. Wine and honey might be good, but putting pepper in it, interesting. Aluntit is a mixture of aged wine and clear water and balsam, which they prepare for drinking after bathing in a bathhouse to cool down from the heat of the bathhouse. It's prohibited to prepare aluntit on Shabbat because it's a type of remedy. Okay, so cooked wine and a luntit of Gentiles are prohibited. And it's just a background here. A luntit of unclear origin. This term probably evolved from the Greek oinante, meaning ointment, often used in reference to a particular ointment prepared with wine. And anomlin, meaning wine mixed with honey. Okay. And balsam, afar simon. This is apparently the plant Commiphora apabalsamum, which is a bush or low tree 3 to 5 meters in height with thin branches and compound leaves. The best quality perfume drips from the edges of the stems in small drops, while most of the perfume is extracted by boiling the branches. Although balsam oil also served medicinal purposes, its primary use was for incense and perfumed oil. Balsam was so valuable in the ancient world that its price was equal to its weight in gold. And there's, this picture isn't very good, but there's a picture of balsam. Okay, so cooked wine and a luntit, which is a mixture of aged wine and clear water and balsam, is prohibited to consume from Gentiles. Okay, and Rabbah and Rav Yosef both say diluted wine is not subject to the halacha of exposure, according to which the consumption of a liquid is prohibited if it's left uncovered, and cooked wine is not subject to the halacha of libation, which prohibits deriving benefit from wine that has been in Gentiles' possession. A dilemma was raised before them. With regard to cooked wine, is it subject to the halacha of exposure, or is it not subject to the halacha of exposure? The Gemara resolves the dilemma. Come in here, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi testified about cooked wine and stated that it's not subject to the halacha of exposure, right? So what they're talking about is barrels that are left uncovered of water, and if the cover was off of it, are you allowed to drink from this barrel? And there was always a fear that maybe snakes, other dangerous things could have gotten into that water, and the rabbis are saying for health and safety reasons, we're not supposed to do this. So can you do it with a barrel of cooked wine? Is there the same fear about the cooked wine that there would be for an exposed barrel of water? And they're saying, no, it's okay to consume wine that has been exposed. The Gemara cites another proof that cooked wine is not subject to the halacha of exposure. When Rabbi Yanai Bar Yishmael became ill, Rabbi Yishmael ben Zerud and other sages went to him to inquire about his health. They were seated, and this very dilemma was raised before them. With regard to cooked wine, is it subject to the halacha of exposure, or is it not subject to the halacha of exposure? Rabbi Yishmael ben Zerud said to them, this is what Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says in the name of a great man. Parenthetically, the Gemara asks, and who's the great man? He's Rabbi Chia. He said, cooked wine is not subject to the halacha of exposure. The sages said to Rabbi Yishmael ben Zerud, shall we rely on this claim? Rabbi Yanai Bar Yishmael motioned to them, upon me and upon my neck. That is, you can certainly rely on this claim. So Yanai Bar Yishmael, the sick person whom these rabbis were visiting, the rabbis visiting engaged in a halachic discussion, and one of the visiting rabbis saying that you're allowed to drink exposed wine based on this learning that he had passed down, and the sick rabbi says, yes, upon my life, upon me and upon my neck, this teaching is a true teaching. The Gemara relates another incident. Shmuel and Ablet, a Gentile scholar, were sitting together, and others brought cooked wine before them. That's fascinating that Shmuel, who's from the 200s, is sitting with a non-Jewish scholar. Let's read about him. Personalities. Oblate. Oblate was a Gentile scholar who was very close to Shmuel. The Talmud relates several encounters and discussions between them. Oblate was familiar with Jewish customs, and in the Jerusalem Talmud, several other conversations between him and Jewish sages are recorded. Although Oblate's origins are unknown, his name indicates that he might have been Babylonian, as it is apparently derived from the Babylonian name Sanballat. It's fascinating. We know from scholarship that rabbis in Caesarea in like the 300s had conversations with priests. So it's just fascinating that that there are these conversations taking place. Shmuel and Oblate, a Gentile scholar, were sitting together, and others brought cooked wine before them. Oblate withdrew his hand to avoid rendering the wine prohibited to Shmuel. Seeing this, Shmuel said to Oblate that the sages said cooked wine is not subject to the prohibition of wine used for a libation, and therefore you need not withdraw your hand on my account. So Oblate was being nice, saying, there could be, if I touch this, then that might render it, because I'm a Gentile, might render it unfit for my friend Shmuel to drink it. And Shmuel said, no, this particular kind of wine, it's okay for you to touch. So that's interesting. Okay, it's 10:18. I want to stop here for today. As I send out in the email today to members of the Talmud class, we're meeting the next 3 weeks, April 7th, 14th, and 21st. The 28th is during Passover, so we're not going to meet that morning. And then we'll meet again 3 more weeks, May 5th, 12th, and 19th, and then that will be it for the year, because the next weekend is Memorial Day, and then it's June already. So we have 6 more sessions, 3 in April, 3 in May, and have a good rest of the day, everybody, and see you all
Thank you.
next week. Take care.
Thank you. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.